Picture this. You're driving through Metro Manila, and for every turn you make, there's a for sale sign hanging on yet another condominium unit. With 34 months worth of unsold inventory, the Philippine condo market is overflowing. But here's the catch: this isn't just a buyer's paradise, it's a double edged sword. So, how do you turn this oversupply into your advantage? Let's break it down. Our mission is to empower Filipinos to build wealth and a brighter future. We are driven by a deep love for the Philippines and a vision of seeing the country and its people flourish. My name is Kane, and joining me today is my amazing co host, Justin. One and only
Hello,
Justin.
everybody.
All right. So, what are we going to be talking about today, Justin?
The Metro Manila condo oversupply. It's all over the news, right?
It's everywhere.
It's a
You see it
big,
everywhere.
yeah,
Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, turn on the TV, it's in the news. So what's happening for our viewers? Let me just explain to everyone briefly. As of November 2024, the lead two property consultants indicated that a significant oversupply of condominiums in Metro Manila, and it is now equivalent to 34 months worth of inventory. So this increase is due to the surge in units released or re-released into the market, as many buyers were unable to complete transactions after making down payments. Mm. So
well,
typically the market operates within 12 months of oversupply. So, and we're already at 34 months. So it's big, big, big.
yeah,
But let's have a detailed breakdown of the situation here. What exactly is happening? You want to take this, Justin?
yeah. I think probably the biggest reason is the pogos, right? The pogos backing out,
Yeah.
because the majority of the oversupply is not residential; it's office.
Yes.
So, plus what happened was like the pogos came in, they took all the office spaces, but then they also brought with them a lot of Chinese investors that needed to live in the Philippines. It was like a double whammy, right? Like the pogos were taking the office spaces, they were bringing in the Chinese investors.
Yes.
And what actually happened in between like 2015 to 2018, I believe, like office spaces for their rents were increasing because they actually didn't have enough space for all these pogos that were coming in.
Yes.
And this is one of the reasons, because that can lead to a lot of developers. I wouldn't say greedy is the right word, but they saw the opportunity because there was a lack of supply.
Yeah.
So they tried to correct that by building a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And the developers didn't ask. It was hard for anybody to see that they would take the government would ban pogos, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they were just like, okay, well, there's not enough supply at the moment, so let's put up the supply because the demand's there. And then all of a sudden, poof, all gone. Pogo's gone, and the Chinese buyers, the Chinese investors that needed to live near the Pogos, gone as well, and it's created that oversupply. But that's not the only reason, right?
Yes. Yes.
That is one of the reasons.
Exactly. I definitely agree. I mean, the Pogos have a very, very big role in the Philippine condo market for the past few years, and now they're all gone. It's just right in a snap of a finger. I believe it was around 300,000 um, Pogo people or persons that rented in Metro Manila and suddenly all gone, right? And those were just residential. But I think the more underlying problem here, I mean, Pogo was one, but I think it's more fundamental, right? I think it's because there was a mismatch between uh, the prices um, of these condominium units to the actual purchasing power of people here in the Philippines. So
Yeah.
when these people from Pogo, Philippine, for those people who don't know, Pogo means Philippine Offshore Gaming Operation. So there was a mismatch. So what happened was there were a lot of buyer backouts, right? So after I believe the numbers are 4,000 units being sold during the quarter of 2024. There were approximately 6,000 cancellations or backouts in that same year. So mainly because they were not able to afford after the down payment, right? And that's what we've
Yeah.
been talking about here in Estra Finance and here in Financial Freedom Philippines all this time, right? It's a big problem that a lot of people think that they can afford it. A lot of people think are hooked on to that idea. Oh, it's cheap, but not a lot of people that they're only paying the down payment, right? And then there's another new supply,
Just
4,000 new more units introduced, more oversupply. Go ahead, Justin.
yeah, I was going to make a point on that because I don't want to say, the big reason of those backouts was agents selling condominiums to people that probably couldn't afford those
Yes,
condominiums, and
100%.
obviously agents were just doing their job, right?
Yeah.
But I would say there's a reason why in Australia, at least, I don't know about the US, but probably works the same, is like agents aren't supposed to help you financially whatsoever. Like it's like two separate professions. Like
Yeah.
people usually, the process goes, you find out your budget first
Yeah.
through a bank or through like us, a mortgage broker,
Yeah.
and then go to the real estate agent. But what happened during that time, and still happening now, happens throughout the history of Philippine real estate, is the agent seems to do everything,
Yes.
but it's not. The agent has an incentive to sell, so
Yes.
they're going to tell you, oh, low down payment, like you
Yeah.
can afford this,
Yeah.
like and this is what's happened. Is like all these people that backed out were sold on how easy it is to pay the down payment. And it is really easy to sell the down payment because developers have made really good terms. Like you have 5 years to pay that down payment. But the problem is the rest of that property is not that easy to pay.
Yes.
And, I was watching an episode, a video on this topic, and they were saying, like, in Dubai, they saw an agent selling to somebody like 3 to 4 units when really they could only afford maybe 1 unit.
Yeah.
And this person was struggling to pay even the down payment because they bought so much. And then lo and behold, when things were turning over, and that's what's happening, right? So a lot of projects that were being built in 2018 pre-pandemic are now turning over now.
Yeah.
Even because in the pandemic there was a delay, right? Because like everything was shut down, it's hard to get material, so everything is turning over now. That means like all the developers are now cashing in the 80% that you need to, 70 to 80% that you need to pay. So that's why you're having all these backouts as well, because that's the timing, right? But I guess my main point is that the biggest reason for the backouts is the fact that people didn't understand what their budget was coming in.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And anybody listening, I think that's probably one of the best first steps that you can take is understand your budget so you don't become one of the 6,000 cancellations that happened.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of cancellations, I hope we don't get canceled by saying these. You were not trying to antagonize real estate agents here in the Philippines.
No, not at all.
Right?
Yeah.
Definitely not. Yeah.
They're just I believe agents are just doing their job.
Yeah.
And they're playing by the rules set by the law. So it's not like they're doing anything illegal.
Yeah.
I think fundamentally there's an issue with the system itself.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I think, I would like to see a little bit more of that. Hey, you need to get a pre-approval first, because you
Yes,
can't, most of the
I
times an
agree.
agent here in Australia will not take you serious until you've figured out what your budget is, because then
Yes.
you're also they're also going to waste time, right?
Yeah.
So I believe that would be a good rule to put in place in the
Yeah,
Philippines, like
pre-approvals as well.
get a
And
yeah.
for anybody who's listening to us or watching us for the first time, pre-approval means that the bank already gives you um the amount that you can take out a loan for without you finding a property necessary, because in the Philippines you need to find a property first, right? But in other countries like in Australia, in the United States, um, basically in the Western world as well, they have what you call pre-approvals, and I think it's a big problem because people really don't know their budget, right? People think they can afford, but then when it comes to the time after the down payment, they panic and then they back out, right? They have to sell it. So there's a big gap. And one more thing I'd like to add before we move on to another part of this conversation is that I believe there's a shift in the preference of buyers. So me as a Filipino, um, if you would ask anybody uh, in the streets, would you like to live in a house or would you like to live in a condo if I give you this amount of money? And well, personally speaking, no, people would prefer to have homes, properties, right? So I think there's just a shift in the preference of Filipinos, mainly because of two things. Number one is the space. When you have a house and lot, there's bigger space, right? And Filipinos typically live in big families. And the condominiums are not always suited for it. Depends, right? And then the affordability as well. So condominiums at the center of business districts are very expensive, and you can get a big house for the same amount of price. I think that's one of the reasons as well. There's a shift in the buyer preference. But anyways, let's move on. So why is
just
this important?
just
Yeah, go
before
ahead.
we get a little, so I have another one, right, with the real
Go
estate agent.
ahead.
So again, I have nothing against real estate agents, but so something that they were peddling that caused this as well was the buy and flip. So
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were sort of selling, hey, if you buy a pre-selling condominium before it turns over, you can sell it, right? Because
yeah.
like every year, in theory, it works out, and it has worked out, especially when BGC was hot, right? Everyone wanted a piece of BGC. So it was all like rainbows and sunshine for this strategy, which is
Yeah,
buy, and then just
flip.
before turnover, just before you need to get financing, sell it to another person and then
Yes.
make that profit, right? But the issue with that is if no one buys, which is what's happening now, then you will lose, especially if you're like, okay, wait, I'll buy four because I can afford four down payments and then easy, I'll sell it before I need to finance the rest of it.
Hmm.
Well, what's happening is like a lot of those people can't sell because
Yeah.
there's no demand right now. There's too
Yes.
much supply. So everybody with that strategy is one of the 6,000 people that have to give up their condominium, and also the consequences for those 6,000 is probably they've lost more than 50% of their down payment.
Yeah.
Like I've heard a lot of people that their down payment was like 200,000, and now they're only getting like probably like 40, something
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's the unfortunate nature of uh, gambling like that, because that's a strategy where you're gambling.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the question here, no, why do you think we're talking about this? Why do you think it's important that we're having this conversation, Justin?
I think it's important because number one, and this is actually the main message I think we want to give people, is that This oversupply is isolated.
Yes.
So it's
There you
only
go.
in Metro Manila, right?
Yes.
So don't read the headlines. And because I feel like the headlines make it feel like,
It's the end of
especially
the
if you're not
world.
it's the end of the world, Philippines is a bad place to invest in.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, there's an oversupply in the Philippines.
Yeah.
There's an oversupply in Metro Manila, but in a lot of other places, it's still very much
It's normal.
going
Yeah.
off. And that's why you said the buyer's preference, right? I think not only is the shift in buyer preference for house and lots, but it's also for location. Like, everyone, 1 minute Metro Manila is hot, now it's not, and that is part of the real estate. Is sometimes an area becomes hot, then becomes cold, then becomes hot again.
Yeah.
But what you have to be careful of is don't apply this whole situation to all of the Philippines, because that's not true. It's very isolated. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't spread, but I don't think it will spread. I think it will stay in Metro Manila, because what is going to happen is there is an oversupply, right? So the prices are probably going to go down. Well, developers are going to do everything they can to try and sell that oversupply. So demand is going to come back because developers are going to discount properties,
sale,
give really, really good flexible payments, even more flexible than now. And then what I've been hearing is there's an increase in rent to own as well.
Yeah.
So, which is a great deal. I think that before, you got to be careful though. There's a lot of scam rent to own things, but I think this will force developers to do good rent to own, where you don't need to put a deposit whatsoever and you're paying monthly. Because usually developers don't like that, because that means that they get their money later, right? They would rather you put a down payment in, you get financing, and then they get the money within probably a couple years. Versus if it's like you're only paying a monthly until you own it, I mean, that could take like 10 years before they get it, right? But at this moment, because the supply is so overblown, it becomes what you call a buyer's market.
Yes.
So if for people that don't know what that means, real estate, it means that the leverage is on the buyer.
Yeah.
Versus when it's a seller market, the leverage is on the seller, right? Or the developer, whoever is selling it. But right now in Metro Manila, the buyers have all the leverage because of the supply. So that's why developers and even people selling their condominiums are at a disadvantage and will bend over backwards for you as a buyer to buy that property.
Yeah. So it's such a good segue to our next topic, which actually is the real estate market cycle. So I loved how you put where there's a buyer, the buyer's market at the moment, and then it becomes the seller's market, right? So, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of people need to take into consideration all the time, especially when you're looking at the real estate market, because it's in a cycle, right? So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the cycle. So what's the first phase of this cycle? Okay, so the first phase is the recovery phase. So what happens in this stage? So number one, the demand is low, the prices were falling, and the market begins to stabilize after a downturn. So the developers slow down their construction projects, and the buyers with cash on hand, they find excellent bargains as sellers become more motivated to offload properties. So how is this relevant right now in the Philippines? Personally speaking, on how I would analyze, we're not yet here more specifically in Metro Manila. We're not yet in the recovery phase, but it's going to go here. It's going to reset to this first step, right? Not yet. Let's talk about it later on. The next thing that happens is the expansion phase. So what happens in the expansion? The economic growth fuels higher demand for real estate. So there's job growth, urbanization, infrastructure development, the prices of the properties and the rents rise, and the developers accelerate construction to meet the heightened demand. So I think we saw
Yeah.
this in BGC. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the good example would be recovery. So stage one would be really when BGC was nothing, like dirt, right? And then expansion is when BGC had that resurgence of urban development, heaps of buildings were being popped up. So it was like now turning into what it is now. So those are the first two. And then we are now in the third one. So if you
Not
explain
yet.
the,
There we
yeah.
go. And I believe this is where Metro Manila is, the third phase, which is the hyper supply phase. So what happens here? So this occurs when construction outpaces actual demand. So developers overestimate market growth. So this leads to oversupply of properties, right? It's exactly the same, the textbook definition of what's happening. So this creates downward pressure on the prices and rents. So as you will see in the news, rents are dropping by 50-60% even, right?
Yeah.
So it leaves many units vacant, and it's making it hard for sellers to find buyers. So right now, with the current situation in the Philippines, we have 34 months worth of condo inventory, and the typical oversupply should only really be 12 months, because it would mean it would take 1 year to meet that, right? To sell that. But right now there's 34 months, which means it would take what, 3 years
Yeah.
for that to sell, right?
Which is, by the way,
yeah.
because it's the Philippines, it could be slower. So add plus 2 years. So at 3 to 5 years before Metro really recovers. And that's something to note, actually. A strategy I believe that developers are going to do is they're going to really slow down new projects in Metro Manila because of the oversupply. Because that's one way, right? So if you've got an oversupply, one way to fix it is just to stop building and wait for the supply to hit, because like it really, for those who don't know, like real estate values at the core are driven by supply and demand. So if there is more supply than demand, prices will decrease. If there is more demand than supply, prices will increase. But if they stop, eventually that supply will catch up. The demand will catch up to the supply, because there's no longer supply being added into the market, but there's always going to be demand for real estate. So that is one tactic that the developers are going to put into play.
Yeah, exactly. And just to explain, I believe also one of the reasons why this happened is because of the construction boom before the pandemic, right? So there was a surge of units. The releasing of the units are now happening in the market as well, because the construction halted during the pandemic too, right? So right now everything's just stacking up. But anyways, let's move on to our next phase, which is the recession phase. So in the recession phase, this is marked by the declining prices, the low demand, and the minimal new construction. So this stage often presents opportunities for long-term investors to purchase properties at deeply discounted prices, with the potential for significant returns when the market eventually recovers. So this is where we're all waiting. I'm waiting. Maybe you, Justin, you're waiting as well. But I believe, I think it applies in all kinds of investment. But when you're on sale, it's the best time to buy, right?
Yeah,
what do you think?
Yeah. No, the best time to buy is when nothing has been built, or when things are going. When getting in early, or getting in when things are going down. That's the best time. Worst time to buy is when everyone knows it, right?
When everyone's excited.
And we'll discuss that. Yeah, when everyone's so excited, then that's like, and that's what happens, right? So just hopefully we can create a visual of this. So it's like a ladder almost, like, because what you're gonna see is like recovery phase, and then there's going to be a sort of boom, and that is the expansion.
Yeah.
And then you're going to see hyper supply, and usually what that means is another row, and it might even go down because of the
Sideways,
recession,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it will come back. So even though people are like, because this isn't really, everyone's saying like it's a crash. It's not a crash because there's not a lot of the residential property market is propped up by expats, and expats do have really good money to be able to keep these properties, right? And also with the residential, the demand's still there. The office spaces. The demand is really high for office spaces in the Philippines because, if people don't know, there's a boomer crisis at the moment. Like in the US, there's around, within probably the next 5 years, there's millions of Americans about to retire. I mean, here in Australia, hundreds of thousands of people are about to retire. And there's not enough young people in those countries to take up all those jobs, or at least all those big companies are going to be thinking about cutting costs, especially because of inflation. And one of the best places to go to is the Philippines at the moment, because we have a population of only an average age of 26, I believe. And we speak great English, we're super hardworking. And on top of that, we're super cheap.
Yes.
So
cheap in
that's why
food.
In terms of labor, we're super cheap, right? And that's why the office, yes, there's a big oversupply in office spaces, but companies are going to come here and set up shop because of that boomer crisis. And we're seeing it, right? The call center, what do you call it? The BPO
there we go.
market. I mean, they're like on a trajectory of just increasing, right? They're already around like 5 to 6% of our GDP. They're probably going to be more later. I don't want to go side tangent. The only thing that might affect that is AI, but that's a story for
different podcast.
Yeah, sorry for another. Yes, yeah.
All right. Very well said, Justin. All right. So, with all that being said, what should buyers and investors do? Let me go first. Number one, of course, do your research. You have to conduct your own research. You can't just rely on what's the news, what's the chismes, right? What you hear from your neighbors. You can't, right? You have to understand the market condition and the market trends. You have to know things like what are the infrastructure projects that's happening, like the Metro Manila subway. You've got to take that into account as well when you're analyzing these kinds of things. So you have to do your research. You have to know the market trends, the cycles. There's so much more than just the bad news. It's just right. It's just the surface of really what's happening. But
I think
go ahead.
One of the big things actually that people should keep in mind when conducting their research is that every location has its own market. So Metro Manila has its own market. Pampanga has its own market. Davao, Cebu, and they're all, obviously they're all in the Philippines, but they all move in different ways. So if something's happened in Metro Manila, you have to, smart investors understand that doesn't mean it's happening in Cebu or it's happening in Davao.
Exactly.
As a real estate investor, when you're conducting your research, you really have to dive deeper where you're going, okay, country, then city, then suburb, then the development itself. And that's what good property investors do. They dig deep and they understand that even projects in BGC, different, Surendra versus McKinley or something like that. Even those two, even though they're really close to each other, can have different projects in terms of value and where they're going. So you really have to, and this is why I don't like a lot of videos on this topic that's very black and white, where they're like, no, you should
Yeah.
invest, you shouldn't invest. I guess this is a different topic, but you also have to think about your portfolio,
Yeah.
because for a lot of people, it probably doesn't make sense, even if prices go down by 30%, to invest in Metro Manila, because especially if you're an early investor and you're trying to double your investment, it's probably better to invest in early startup locations that haven't
Yep.
reached maturity. But if you're a seasoned investor and you have a lot of properties already and you're worried about increasing your net worth and you want a very stable appreciation property that you know in 20, 30 years time is going to be worth a whole lot of money, then, and you can afford to not have rents or the property not increasing, then it might be a really good idea for you to buy in Metro Manila, right? So my main point about this is it depends on your portfolio. So people have to really understand, well, like, what are their goals? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to buy property and buy more properties, so focus on appreciation? Are they trying to make money, so cash flow? Are they, what's their goals? What are they trying to do? And
Right.
use that as a basis to figure out whether they should do something or not, and not rely on the head.
Yeah. Definitely agree. And I think one of the best times to research, well, in my opinion, is when everyone panics. So right now, I think it's a really good time to research because the time to like the window, the buying window, it's close. I believe when everyone's panicking because everyone's leaving, right? So it makes you see the buying window better. So I guess that's it. That's our advice for the buyers and investors.
I just,
So
I think, actually, I think a good thing to talk about is number one, make sure that you understand real estate fundamentals, because this is you having the knowledge to know if you should invest in something or not, gives you the ability to know if the headlines are wrong, right? Because like the
yeah,
problem with people that are falling for the headlines, and this isn't like, I'm not saying like the media is throwing this out of proportion. I think it's fine, but so you can protect yourself
yeah,
from knowing like who's saying the right thing, who's saying the wrong thing. And if you're a serious investor, which I think if anybody's looking to buy property, they should probably do their research because it's a whole lot of money. Understand the fundamentals of property investing, like, how to analyze a location, how to crunch the numbers. And if you know that, then you can't get fooled by headlines. So it's
right.
understand to do your homework and read up. Like, we're helping, hopefully. This is
Yeah,
the reason why we started this podcast, but we're also only one source. So I
yes,
would suggest, like, going to other
multiple.
sources, obviously watching us, like and subscribe, of course. Like,
Yeah,
we're trying to be very unbiased, but um, yeah, learn
learn.
learn and stay hungry, and you won't get fooled by headlines or any gurus telling you something wrong. And then
Yep.
just lastly, generally, I think in most cases, if you're listening to this and you're one of the people that is being affected by property prices decreasing,
Uh-huh.
generally it's not that great of idea. And again, it depends on your financial situation, right? So please take this advice with a grain of salt, because any financial advice should always be contextual, and you should always look at the advice and see if it applies to your situation. But you generally want to hold when there's a downturn, because again, you're selling when it's a buyer's market. You want to sell when there's a seller's market and you
Seller's
have the
market.
leverage to sell, because then you can sell at a high price. If you're selling now, it's at a discount again, but you might not have a choice because you don't know if you can afford you can't afford the payments or anything like that. So of course, like, I feel for you, but if you can hold on, you know, a good quote that I heard was, when it comes to real estate, time fixes all mistakes. Yeah, you like that, right?
Yeah.
Because like
That's
if you
real
stay in
nice.
real estate long enough, like you say, even just 5 years, like what the downturn will end and property prices will increase, and you will get a better price than selling at the moment.
So, yeah, just in summary, there is an oversupply in Metro Manila, that's for sure. This happened because of the POGO ban, and then there are buyer backouts, lots and lots of factors. But something to take in consideration of would be the market cycles, the recovery, the expansion, hypersupply phase, and the recession, and it starts all over. And one that you should really do in times like this is do your own research, right? And focus on the fundamentals as much as possible. Just stay out from the short-term market noise. All right. Okay. So I think that's it. We should leave it there for today, Justin.
Yeah. Look, if you're one of the people that is struggling with their home loan, because obviously we've had heaps of backouts already, but not everybody's backed out, and still there's a lot of survivors in there. But you probably got financing before pre-COVID, and you just got out of your fixing period. I think it's important to know that you're not stuck in that situation, that you can get out of it potentially, and lower your interest rate, and lessen the financial burden. If you would like help with that, please reach out. It's something we specialize in. It's called refinancing. So we will analyze whether the costs of moving, because it does cost to move, but if you do it strategically, it can really save you a whole lot of money. So we can help you there. And then I think an important one is to talk about our free borrowing power consultation. So that is where we figure out we figure out your property budget and tell you, what you can actually afford and how much that's going to cost, so you can accurately judge based on your financial situation whether it makes sense for you to buy certain properties. And it can save you from being one of the 6,000 people that had to back out and lose a deposit, and also like lose a ton of years of your property investing career. So please reach out to us if you want to refinance, or if you want to figure out your borrowing power and and start your real estate journey a lot safer.
Okay. And if you want to talk to us, head on over to our real estate community group on Mighty Network. So it's free to join, and we share a lot of knowledge, me and Justin, and our other co-host, Georgina. So we discuss there, we have conversations, we have discussions about real estate, investing, properties, and we hope that would help you on your investment journey. So sign up for a borrowing power consultation and join our real estate community. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And we will see you on our next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.